Deborah Gale Stone was 18 years old when she started what she believed was a dream job. In 1974, she worked as a hostess at Disneyland's America Sings attraction, a rotating theater designed to celebrate American music. Guests sat on moving platforms while walls shifted to reveal each scene. From the audience, it felt harmless. Behind the scenes, it was not. On July 8th, just 2 weeks after the ride opened, Deborah was assigned to a backstage position between a stationary wall and a rotating platform. Her responsibility was simple: guide guests and keep the show moving. What she wasn't warned about was a design flaw hidden in the machinery. At its narrowest point, the gap between the moving wall and the fixed structure was only 12 inches wide. At approximately 10:30 p.m., as the theater transitioned between scenes, the rotation began. Deborah was still in position when the platform moved. There were no warning lights and no emergency stop within reach. The hydraulic system driving the rotation was built to move forward with thousands of pounds of force. As the wall closed in, Deborah became trapped in the narrowing space. Guests heard screaming from behind the walls, but many assumed it was part of the show. The machinery did not stop. Within seconds, the pressure caused fatal internal injuries. By the time other cast members shut the system down, Deborah was already dead. She remained conscious for an estimated 40 seconds. The next day, the attraction reopened with added safety measures. The show went on, but the illusion had already claimed a life forever. Marcelo Torres was 22 years old when he visited Disneyland with friends on September 5, 2003. Like millions of guests before him, he chose to ride Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, a runaway mine train coaster built to feel chaotic while remaining controlled. The train reached speeds of around 30 miles per hour, twisting through tunnels and sharp turns, designed to feel dangerous but not be dangerous. That morning, however, something was already wrong. Maintenance crews had replaced a critical wheel assembly the night before. A required safety wire meant to secure the axle was never installed. No supervisor verified the work. The train was cleared for operation anyway. Torres sat in the front row of the first passenger car directly behind the locomotive. As the train climbed its third lift hill, the unsecured axle slowly worked itself loose. At approximately 11:22 a.m., the train crested the hill and began its descent. Moments later, the locomotive's undercarriage separated from its chassis. The cars behind it continued forward at full speed. The sudden collapse crushed the front passenger compartment inward. Torres absorbed the full force of the impact. The confined space around his seat collapsed, compressing his chest and ribs. He did not die instantly. Medical examiners later determined that his lungs collapsed, causing him to suffocate over the course of roughly 2 minutes. Other riders injured but conscious watched as he struggled to breathe, unable to help. Paramedics arrived to find Torres still strapped into his seat. His friends seated just inches behind him survived with minor injuries. A difference of feet decided who lived and who didn't. Mark Maples was 15 years old when he visited Disneyland with his family on January 3, 1964. That afternoon, he boarded the Matterhorn bobsleds, an alpine-themed coaster known for sharp turns and steep drops. At the time, the ride relied on a simple lap belt, the only restraint as sleds reached speeds near 20 miles per hour. As the bobsled climbed the first lift hill, witnesses later recalled Mark laughing and daring his friend to raise their hands. When the sled crested the hill and began its descent, Mark suddenly stood up. Whether he misunderstood the ride or acted on impulse was never determined. Physics made the outcome unavoidable. As the sled pitched forward, his balance shifted. Momentum pulled him out of the vehicle. Mark fell roughly 30 feet onto the steel track below, striking his head first. The impact caused catastrophic brain trauma, but it did not kill him instantly. Ride operators found him on the track alive but unable to move or speak. His breathing became shallow as swelling increased inside his skull. Emergency crews rushed him to a nearby hospital where surgeons attempted to relieve pressure on his brain. Mark survived for 3 days. He never regained consciousness. The incident permanently changed how ride safety was viewed. Dolly Young was 48 years old when she visited Disneyland in January 1984. The Matterhorn bobsleds had already been operating for decades, and to most guests it felt familiar and routine. Each bobsled was equipped with a seatbelt, but enforcement was inconsistent. Operators did not always verify that restraints were properly fastened before dispatch. On January 3rd, Dolly boarded a bobsled in the early afternoon. Whether her seatbelt was never secured or failed to latch correctly was never conclusively determined. The ride began without incident as the sled climbed toward the summit of the artificial mountain. Midway through the course, the bobsled entered a rough section of track, known for sudden jolts. As the sled rounded a sharp turn at close to 30 miles per hour, the combination of speed and centrifugal force lifted Dolly from her seat. She was thrown forward and landed directly onto the steel track. For several seconds, she lay on the rails as the ride continued operating. A second bobsled descending behind her had no time to stop. The collision was immediate and fatal. Emergency responders later described the scene as one of the most disturbing incidents in the park's history. The ride was shut down, investigated, and eventually reopened. The attraction remained. Dolly did not. Brandon Zucker was 4 years old when he visited Disneyland with his parents on September the 22nd, 2000. That day, his family entered Toontown and boarded Roger Rabbit's cartoon Spin, a dark ride designed to feel playful and chaotic, with spinning taxi cabs moving through brightly colored scenes. Brandon sat beside his mother inside one of the yellow cabs. The ride began normally. As the vehicle turned and rotated, something subtle but dangerous became relevant. Beneath the cab door was a gap between the vehicle and the floor, measuring roughly 7 inches, small enough to go unnoticed, large enough for a child's body. Midway through the ride, Brandon slipped from his seat. Before his mother could react, he slid through the opening beneath the door and was pulled under the moving cab. The metal undercarriage, weighing more than 700 pounds, pinned him against the track as the ride continued to operate. For approximately 3 minutes, Brandon remained trapped beneath the vehicle. Other guests heard his mother screaming in the darkness, but could not see what was happening. When operators finally stopped the ride, Brandon was unconscious and barely breathing. He survived the initial incident, but the lack of oxygen caused severe brain damage. Brandon never recovered. He lived for 9 more years in a persistent vegetative state dependent on constant medical care. In 2009, at the age of 13, he died from complications directly linked to the injuries he suffered that day. The ride reopened. The consequences followed him for the rest of his life. Disneyland was built to feel timeless. Bright lights, familiar music, and carefully designed stories create a sense of safety that invites people to let their guard down. That feeling is not accidental, it is engineered. And for the vast majority of guests, it works exactly as intended. But the cases you've just heard are reminders of what exists beneath that surface. Complex machines, human decisions, shortcuts, oversights, systems that are expected to run perfectly every hour, every day without failure. When they don't, the consequences are immediate and irreversible.